All right, hello, and welcome. We're very excited to have you all here for Bite-Sized Data Fundamentals, Data Governance Policies, and Interoperability. As you're joining us, please make sure to have your mic muted and your video camera turned off. And additionally, please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, your role, organization, and where you're from. And we'll get started in just a minute. Very excited to have you here. All right, welcome to all the new folks who just joined us. Thank you for joining us here for Bite-Sized Data Fundamentals, Data Governance Policies, and Interoperability. Please keep your mics muted, cameras off, and introduce yourself in the chat. We're very excited to have you here, and we are going to get started. So, very excited to have you all with us today for the first of our Bite-Sized Data Fundamentals series, where we are giving you big data information in a bite-sized format. That's the new slogan. I've come up for it. And we're just very excited to have Lynette Attai here to talk with us about data governance, policy inventories, and interoperability. I'm going to start things off with a little introduction about Project Unicorn and the two of us. And then I'll hand it over to Lynette, and then we will have a question and answer session at the end. As we are going through, feel free to drop your questions in the chat so we can address them in real time. But if you would like to chat some more at the end, feel free to hold your question towards the Q&A section and unmute your mic, and we can have a discussion at the end. I'm Jonathan Barry Wolf. I'm a marketing and communications member of the Project Unicorn team. I get to work with all these incredible speakers and the rest of the Unicorn folks to set up these webinars. And so it's always a thrill to do that and to speak with you all. And I'm here with Lynette Attai, like I said, subject matter expert at COSN and president of Playwell LLC. We're very excited to have her here with us. A little bit about Project Unicorn before we get started. And a quick reminder as well that everybody mute their mics and have their cameras off as well as we continue on with the presentation. Project Unicorn is an organization dedicated to advancing and implementing data interoperability in K-12 ed tech tools. We want to come alongside school districts and ed tech vendors and help them in their interoperability journey. And so please sign our Project Unicorn pledge. Not only is it an outward expression of your dedication to data interoperability, but it also allows you to access resources, webinars like these, and one-on-one technical assistance with our Project Unicorn team. So please check out the pledge, sign it, and the link should be in the chat there for you all. Additionally, if you're an ed tech vendor here today, apply for the Project Unicorn Interoperability Certification. This is a free resource for Project Unicorn signatories offered in partnership with Digital Promise. Basically, you fill out the certification. The interoperability of your tool is ranked on a tier from 1 to 4, and you can see the 4 badge here, which you receive after you complete the certification. This badge can be used to market to your audiences your dedication to data interoperability. And it also means that you get some customized support from Project Unicorn to help advance your interoperability. So please check out this certification. And I believe that is all I have. So I'm going to pass things over to Lynette.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of COSN, partnering with Project Unicorn. And we're going to talk about, as promised, data governance, some bite-sized fundamentals. And so the idea here is to give you an overview of the subject, to give you some tools to get started, but not go so deeply into the weeds that we get a little overwhelmed, right? This is like just good enough, just the right size to help us feel like we understand the topic a little bit better, maybe, and we have some tools to get started. As Jonathan mentioned, anytime as I'm going through this, please feel free to drop questions in the chat and I'll try to answer them in real time. Or you can hold your questions. We have reserved time at the end for Q&A as well. So in order to get started, we talk about what are we talking about, right? What is data governance? Data governance is a term that's used in a lot of ways, in a lot of contexts. And really, I kind of lean on a definition that looks at data governance as a set of principles and practices that helps us to ensure that our data is high quality, that it's available, that we have some integrity and consistency of the data throughout the entire life cycle of the information. I think it's probably obvious why that might be a foundational element of an interoperability program. This is about the quality and the usability and the integrity and the protection of the information. Which, if we are moving data around, we're combining data sets, we're making sure our data is transferable to different uses, this becomes a really important component. We know that if we do not have integrity of our data, if we don't have quality data, if we have data that is missing or incomplete or inaccurate, that can really create harm to the individual whose data we are working with. So we want to make sure that we really are working across with a set of standards, policies, and metrics to ensure that we have an effective and efficient data management program. Data governance helps you get a consistent view of your data and allows you to understand not just where it is, but where it's going, which then in turn allows us to protect the data wherever it may end up, right? As we're moving data through our systems, we want to make sure it is protected. And that's really the piece of data governance that I want to speak to today, which is this data protection piece. Data protection, as you know, a big topic. I could spend, as you know, I could spend hours talking about it, but I won't. But really, we want to talk here about data privacy as the piece of data governance that we are most concerned with, as well as data security. And data protection is really about our behavior and our controls around the information. And we're guided not only by our ethics and our mission and our vision and community norms, but also the laws that we have in place. We implement those laws across a series of policies. Policies give us documents that explain why we need to act in a certain way, why we need to have certain controls in place. And then we put procedures in place to implement against those policies. And the procedures give us the how and what to do in order to make good on the policy requirements. We often write policies and procedures with alignment with sets of specific standards. Typically, if we're doing it well, these are nationally recognized standards that give us controls and a means to measure how well we are implementing against a particular policy requirement, how well we're implementing against a particular control. So that's kind of the high level nutshell of what we want to discuss today. And that's easy enough to say, harder to do. So when it comes to writing policy, one of the things certainly in my experience is that as I write policies for a living and among many other things, is that sometimes the hardest part is figuring out where do I start, right? I know I need to write policies to protect my information. This subject is broad and wide. It involves a lot of people. There are a lot of policies to write. I don't even know where to begin. So it helps to really understand first that what makes a good policy. Being clear is, of course, really important. Being realistic. Right? Our policies need to be implemented. Policies are just words on paper, and if we don't actually put them into action with procedures, they're not helpful, and in fact, they can be hurtful if we say we have this policy, but we're not following it. So our policies need to be realistic, reflecting, again, our mission, our values, ethics, norms, as well as legal requirements. They also need to be able to be monitored and enforced. We don't want words on paper, we want a living, breathing document. We ultimately bring it to life with the procedures. But we have to start with policy development. And in order to do that, we want to really first understand, well, what policies are we writing? And there is a resource I'm going to share out with you that's going to have a whole list you can work through, and a checklist to help keep you accountable and help you measure your own policy writing progress. So I'm not going to list a whole bunch here now. But you want to start by understanding, really just at a fundamental level, what are my resources for policy writing? Am I the one responsible for writing policy? Is there a particular policy that is the responsibility of the superintendent or the board to write? And oftentimes there will be policies that come down from the state level, there will be policies that come down from your board, your superintendent, and then there will be other policies that you are responsible for writing for your team, for your department, for the organization. First step is to really just understand the lay of the land in your institution, to say, what policies am I responsible for? What is my purview? And then gather your team. When we're writing policies, it's important to remember that we're writing them for ourselves, we're writing them for other people as well. So we need to make sure that we are writing policies that consider the work that we are going to be impacting and those who will be impacted by a policy. So it's always really helpful to have a small group of stakeholders who can help seed the ground for introduction of a policy, who've been there with you from the start, who understand the need for the policy, and will help you socialize the policy across the institution once it's done. Then it gets to the tricky part, which is actually putting pen to paper, which is where a lot of folks kind of get stuck. So there are a lot of tricks that I've used over the years to help get unstuck with the policy writer's block. And the one that I found most useful is to start with your metadata. And by this, I mean the information in a policy that is everything but the guts of the policy. So think about it this way. What's the name of the policy? Is there a policy number? What's the purpose of the policy? Can you articulate that in a short 2-sentence blurb? What does it apply to? What function does it apply to? Who does it apply to? Is this a policy that applies to everyone in the institution, just to a particular team, just to a particular department? And how will it be enforced? Who's going to be responsible for enforcement? Who owns this policy? Getting all of that structure in place is really important for the implementation piece of the policy. And what you're doing is you're building a framework for all your policies to follow. And what you will often find, I hope, is that once you have that metadata written out, drafting the actual policy follows pretty easily. The most important piece being the scope of the policy and the purpose of the policy. What is it that we're trying to accomplish with the policy can help really inform the body of the policy. And some of your policies will be very long, some will be very short. There's no magic length to writing a policy. I recommend when you are sitting down to write policies, you start with something small and discrete. It's going to cover a very specific topic and be done. Or be done and be useful for writing other policies. For example, writing your data classification policy can be a very discrete exercise where you're writing a policy that's going to articulate what types of data are going to articulate the different types of data that you have and put them into buckets depending on the sensitivity of that data. You may start with a policy that's even shorter that says, how are we defining personal information in our institution? Because what you'll find is if you get a few of those under your belts, you're making progress, and progress builds momentum, and it gets easier to then build on that. If you wrote your data classification, if you wrote your personal information policy, you can write your data classification policy. If you write your data classification policy, you can then move on and write policies that deal with how we're going to protect data of different sensitivities, who's going to have access to data of different sensitivities, where it can be shared, where it can't be shared, and so on. So start with something discrete and build up from there. Eventually, what you want to get to is a large data governance policy, which is something that those districts that have earned the COSN Trusted Learning Environment seal have done. And the nice thing is that many of these districts have made their data governance policies publicly available. So I say here, get inspired, because there are publicly available data governance policies that you can take a look at, get inspired by, maybe draw a particular phrase or turn a phrase from, really give you a guidepost to what a more holistic data governance policy book would look like and the types of topics that it covers. It doesn't mean these districts have perfected their data governance policies. It means they have good, robust, mature policies in place, and they are continuously improving and continuously building on them. So don't feel like you have to go it alone. You can start by looking at what else is in the market. What have your peers done? And take your inspiration from there. Just make sure that when you write your policies, they actually reflect what your school or district is doing, because a policy that someone else has written for some other district isn't going to work for you. Remember, it's about putting them into action. Policy is just words on paper until we implement it. You need to be able to implement the policy. So make sure it works for you, customize it, but go ahead and take your inspiration from those who have gone through this journey before you. In addition, COSN has developed what I think is a great resource, and I did not write it, so I'm going to give full credit to the Education Committee, the working group at COSN, and Jim Siegel, who's now with Future Privacy Forum, who did some tremendous work writing this resource, which is called Trusted Learning from the Ground Up. You can find it at cosn.org/privacy. This resource is going to outline for you some fundamentals to policy development. It's going to explain to you what's a policy, what's a procedure, what's the difference, how do laws fit into play here, and importantly, give you a checklist for all the fundamental data governance policies and procedures, data privacy and security here, that districts should have in place. It includes an explanation of the policy, an explanation of the procedure when it's applicable, as well as some notes and resources which oftentimes include links to exemplars, include links to maybe a regulatory guidance resource or a district example where they have written such a policy and have made it public and allowed us to share it in this resource. It's a nice checklist. It has you get started with the basics, the overview, your regulations, your existing policies and procedures, and your state laws, applicable state laws. And then goes through a very comprehensive checklist of this work. Now, the great question from Susan, the governance policies that I cited, these are all available online. So if you are looking for the policies from any of these districts, you can go to their website. If you are looking for this resource, which is several pages of a checklist, it is available at cosn.org/privacy. Are there any questions that come up as you think about policy writing, as you think about building your governance program as a necessary component of and support for your interoperability program? Where are you most challenged? Everyone's writing policies like mad. No challenges. Great question. How long should you budget for creating a data governance policy? A long time. This is not something that you will do in one sitting. It is something that you will develop over time, which is part of the note to start small and build up, because this is a process. You're building policies along with building your entire data privacy and security program. You write policies, you build, you implement, you move on. So it helps to, if you're looking at it from that perspective, make sure you have a real view of what your privacy and security programs will look like, and then start writing. writing policies will be the precursor in some ways to actually implementing the program. But it's not a quick exercise. Bite off what you can chew and keep moving. The idea here, as I often say, as has been told to me many times, get in motion and stay in motion. So set aside some time, once a week, once a month if need be, write a few policies, get them approved, get them reviewed, get them approved. There will be some discussion, and then keep going. Another quick question, who's typically writing these policies? It really varies depending on your district. Some will be handed down to you from the state. Some will be written by your board, your superintendent, cabinet. Some might be written by you, particularly in the realm of particular data security policies, particular specific data privacy policies. So your board might hand down a high-level governance requirement or policy requirement that speaks to aligning with privacy laws. You might then be responsible for creating policies that discuss access limitations and classifications and security controls that need to be in place, encryption, data retention, things of that sort. So they'll typically start by being informed by the laws, then by oftentimes your board, your superintendent, but there will also be policies that you as a technology leader may be writing. Each district, it depends a lot as well on your district governance structure. Other questions? But having these policies in place really helps you to, again, protect the information so that you are ensuring that your data remains useful, available, and protected as you're building your interoperability program. Is there a set of standards to follow or a model? Great question. For privacy, really, I would encourage you to take a look at COSN's Trusted Learning Environment Program. It's at trustedlearning.org. The Trusted Learning Environment Program is a privacy framework written for school districts, by school districts and COSN, as well as support from partners ASA, ASCD, and ASBO. It is a set of 25 requirements across 5 practice areas. So it's a holistic look at an organization's privacy structure, including leadership, data security, business practices, professional development, and classroom practices. You can go to trustedlearning.org and download both the application as well as just a simple self-assessment that will have you score yourself across each of the 25 practice items. It will take you as a technology leader probably about 10 minutes to 15 minutes to complete the self-assessment, and you will be able to see kind of how you stack up against this privacy framework. For security frameworks for school districts, I tend to lean heavily on NIST. NIST cybersecurity framework seems to be the one that is certainly law in New York and percolating as the go-to standard for districts in many other states. So I would encourage taking a look at the NIST cybersecurity framework if you're not already for your cybersecurity program. Other questions?
Well, folks, continue to write your questions in the chat. Lynette, I have a few questions here as well. Thank you so much for talking with us about this today. So for folks who are really just starting out with data governance, like this is the very beginning, what specific policies, or are there specific policies you recommend that they should prioritize as they get started?
I think if you're getting started, the most important thing is to just make sure you understand your legal requirements. Make sure you understand any state policies that may have come down to your district. Getting solid on that work will help you leap off and decide where you're going to start policy writing. Because I think it's really important to remember that when you write policies, you're not trying to write what the law says. Try to think about the law in terms of what behavior must we engage in order to meet the requirements of the law. And there will be a lot of behaviors, and that's going to help guide your list of policy requirements. Otherwise, when it comes to a policy document list, I like to start small. unless you're feeling like you really have a handle on what the look of your privacy program is going to be, the look of your security program is going to be, in which case I would say start with a policy that says, and this is typically a policy that comes from your superintendent or board level, a policy that says, in effect, we are going to build a cybersecurity program, or we're going to build a data privacy program, and these will be the components, and these will be the standards we measure against. That then becomes also a really good leaping off point for everything that follows. There is actually a policy document that should say, we're going to build a cybersecurity program, we're going to build a privacy program, and it's going to kind of articulate the level at which you expect to hit in that program.
Well, you know, another question. You mentioned gathering your team, and I think that's seems like a very interesting part, but could also be a challenge when you're looking across the school. And so then, how do you get folks from other departments, lots of different groups of people, all on board with creating the data governance policies?
Great question, and it is challenging in districts, right? This protecting data requires breaking down silos. As we often say, everyone has a role to play in protecting student data privacy. So if you are in a very siloed organization, if you're just getting started, there are a lot of great resources to help you start to break down those silos and start to sort of reach into other teams, other departments to get your stakeholders together. COSN has a resource for this. It's available at cosin.org/privacy, and it is a infographic of school system stakeholders. And it kind of lists out all departments, the role they have to play in protecting student data privacy. The Trusted Learning Environment program is actually built in large part to help you, or at least require that you, that not you, but that the district bring all of its departments together to protect student data privacy. If you are in a position where doing this stakeholder outreach is challenging, this is the role that you're in, I would encourage downloading another resource, which is called Making the Case to Leadership, again on cosin.org/privacy. It is a presentation deck that is ready-made for you. You can download it and add your logo, customize the slides if you wish. And it is available for you to start having a conversation with your leadership about the need to build a privacy program and a security program. COSN also, through its Empowered Superintendent initiative, has a number of one-sheets available. Again, you can download, slip it under your superintendent's door. There's one for privacy, there's one for cybersecurity, and it's kind of a way to kind of start having that conversation with your leadership about the need to bring holistic organizational attention to privacy and security. We often think in school districts about privacy and security being the responsibility of the technology team. In fact, I would think about these as centralized organizational supports. They support the entire organization. Everyone needs to follow the rules. Everyone needs to follow the policies. Everyone needs to actually engage in the conversation for it to work properly, because consistency around making the right decisions when it comes to privacy and security are critical.
Thank you so much, Lynette. Please, if there's any other questions, we don't have a lot of time left. So if you have a question, please throw it in the chat, or just feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. And we will be wrapping up shortly. Another way to keep the conversation going with questions is to send us a tweet. This is the Project Unicorn Twitter handle. This is Lynette's Twitter handle as well. Please send us your questions over Twitter. We would love to keep chatting with you about data governance policies, and so you can always reach us there. Please, if there's another question, jump right in. Otherwise, we are so grateful that you were all here and joined us for this first in a great webinar series, Bite-Sized Data Fundamentals. Project Unicorn is very excited to come alongside you and work on these types of questions. And so please sign the pledge. I know that the link is in the chat. And so please sign the pledge if you have not already, and join us for future webinars. We've got a bunch in the works, You'll all receive an email with the recording to this webinar, as well as some interesting resources and links to future events. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you real soon. Thanks so much.